I want to say good evening. This is another edition of Public Affairs, Public Access at the Houston Media Source, and I'm so glad to be here with you. I'm Dr. Robert McKinley Gilmore, Sr., your host for tonight. We have a roundtable discussion about some of the central issues affecting our society. Here in Houston, Texas, of course, being the fourth largest city in the United States of America, and the largest city in the South, we pride ourselves on the fact of the diversity and, of course, the urban problems that we have. I have a very distinguished panel with me tonight who's going to share. I want them to introduce themselves, and I'm going to start right here on my left.
Good evening. I'm Reverend Dr. Carl Matthews, the servant leader of Christian Life Community Church and director with Lorenzo Community Health Center, where we provide education and information.
Good evening. My name is Reginald Gordon. I'm the executive director of a program here in the city of Houston called Operation Outreach OG1. The prevention before detention. We work with mostly young men coming from an incarcerated environment.
And my name is David Lee Sincere Jr. I am the CEO of Sincere Media Production and associate pastor of Sienna Ranch Baptist Church. We focus on making sure that we can capture the lives that people live, and also exposing and looking at the issues that people are facing in our society.
And greetings. I come to you as the Houston Association of Black Psychologists president. My name is Dr. Derek Wilson, and I am also an associate faculty member at Prairie View A&M University.
So there you have it. Our audience is going to be fully engaged. Let me share with you some information. The World Health Organization has a major plan that it was introduced in 2013. The action plan really runs to 2020. But the question becomes, did you know that 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4, so if you're sitting in the room right now, if you have your kids, your husband, your friends, you're in the car, 1 in 4 of you are affected by a mental disorder of some point in your life. Now, I know it's more than 4 here, so I'm a veteran, Vietnam veteran. I have my diagnosis already. I'm clearing the deck. I'll put it on the rest of these 4. But first of all, did y'all know that 25%, 27%, did you really know that, Doctor? What?
Yes, and those numbers have been consistently increasing over the course of time due to the climate that we actually exist in. When you start talking about a climate that has no nature of talking about caring for others, servicing others, appreciating how others operate and function within the way they see fit for themselves, you begin to see this challenge in terms of recognizing what is normal, what is normality, and what is abnormality. And so we begin to question this fine line of identifying that which is normal versus that which is abnormal. And for those numbers that you're speaking of, you're speaking of children, you're speaking of women, and more importantly, you're speaking of minorities.
Yes.
And it's the minority group, those who have been disenfranchised, are the ones who are being challenged in terms of who they are, what they represent, and what they can become.
I had mentioned this earlier. I certainly want to put it on the table. Now, of course, recently in Houston, I know they've had a couple of incidents in the Prairie View area, Waller County, where some very tragic circumstances, people killing, friends. A couple of students, I think, were involved. Here in Houston, the most recent was the drive-by shooting where the 10th-month-old baby was killed. Tragically, I think they did arrest the 3rd person who was involved in that. And at what point, because in many cases, and hopefully this is just an observation we can look at what point do we say, did the person know they were mentally ill when they did this? Because to everybody else in society, it's mental illness. To shoot and then tragically kill a 10-month-old. I mean, is that really defined as mental illness, not looking at the DSM-5?
Well, the challenge you have is that you asking about the question is, at what point does the individual know they could be suffering from a mental illness? Well, most oftentimes, and we can attest to it ourselves, when someone is suffering from a mental illness, a lot of times we kind of ignore them. We kind of distance ourselves from them. In other words, you don't have enough people who probably come around and to explain to them or to share with them their concerns about what? Their behaviors or the way they may be thinking or how they're operating. And so now you have individuals who are functioning and operating within a community, in an environment where people are not what? Reaching out and expressing themselves to them, or at least trying to take a stance to assist them.
And I would also say that many people don't understand them. And that's where education is important. If somebody's diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, their nature, their cognitive dysfunctionality pushes people away by their behavior and their actions. And so, you know, we have to do a better job with educating the public, and especially those in our community, and also providing resources for that education.
It's critical.
But is it safe? But is it safe, especially for black men, to come out and even be identified as having a mental illness? Because due to the hurdles that we are already come up against, and to identify to have a mental problem that even our own community haven't come to grip with, as looking at it as something serious, and men looking at it as something as what's wrong with you, you soft, get over it, you know what I'm saying, toughen up, you know what I'm saying? So we have the stigma still out there, especially with the population I deal with. I have a population of young men that I deal with, they're in a survival mode at all times.
Absolutely.
So to put the stigma on their back, even you in a survival mode, that's a form of mental behavior that they have to carry out just to survive in our community.
You know what, Gordon, you make an excellent point there in terms of, you know, are people really recognizing, you know, is the young men, particularly men, feel safe to express the challenges that they have? And case in point, I just had a situation that's really occurred just 3 days ago.
Right.
A young man just sent an anonymous email, but he screenshot, I guess his text messaging or whatever, he screenshot it, and he sent it to me.
All right.
And so I looked and I read it, I was like, oh, this brother is reaching out for help.
Right.
And this brother, I've seen this brother around, I've seen this brother in classes. The brother, you know, articulates very well. He can express himself very well. But deep down inside, something else is going on. Right? So I definitely reached out to him, and that's the point we're talking about, connecting with folks.
Exactly.
So we have to connect with individuals.
And I think it goes back to us as men
Yes.
trying to break down this barrier to build back that bond with our young people that's in these areas that's suffering from these mental stages. You know what I'm saying? And most of the people, just like you were describing about those 4 boys that drive by shooting, people that do this kind of stuff that suffer from the mental. A lot of times these young men have very few avenues of people that they can connect with to tell them that they have certain problems that they're dealing with.
This is a definition that the World Health Organization put out there. It says a definition of health in this sense is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease, meaning that you don't necessarily, Dr. Matthews, you don't necessarily have to have a diagnosis.
Yeah,
Right,
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think that everyone has made some excellent point and observations. You, Doc, talked about particularly caring, a caring environment. I think that's one of the things why I work very close with the faith-based community is to help them understand that to provide a safe place of caring and love. Also to bring some education and information. I have to give kudos to Dr. Gilmore because he was the one who really sounded the alarm, so to speak, and gave me some perspective about mental illness and the transference of mental illness. Now, oftentimes you make the point, OG, about do we really accept that? However, we use the term every day, regardless of what level, whatever socioeconomic disadvantage we may be in, we may call it crazy, we may call it whack, but we do identify it. But when it comes to mental illness, it's just not palatable and acceptable because most people's perception is it is the guy who gets food out the trash can, or the guy who walks around and is not bathing, and the homeless, for instance, and those type of behaviors. But one thing that helped me understand about the transference is that it don't have to be that drastic. Right. It can be just me driving here. You say 1 out of 4. I would say 3 out of 4.
Road rage.
Road rage. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah,
just in the dysfunction of driving a vehicle. And the transference of it affected me on my way here.
Right.
Well, Sister, you mentioned about the education.
Yes.
Of course, you have been involved in that community
Yes.
for quite some time. And I know in your particular population that you work with,
Right.
do you see the difference in those who might be socially, economically impacted as opposed to those who our mayor has said must kind of stay under the bridge here, but at the same time, there's no place to go?
So I live in a pretty nice neighborhood, and I know that, the people that I'm responsible for as an associate pastor at my church, I see get phone calls and emails in terms of mental illness.
Right.
But the difference is resources and having the assets to be able to take advantage of good therapy, right? And so when you're in a middle class neighborhood, you have access to good insurance, but when you live in a shelter, like one of the shelters that I oversee, they are going to the county and to the city, and they have very limited access to therapy. And so then the numbers in the city, in like Harris County Hospital District are so huge, they're overloaded. And so, you don't really get good treatment. I was talking to a young lady this weekend, and she said that she was on the county system and they seen her son for 15 minutes. Now, you're a psychologist. What is 15 minutes gonna do when you're talking to a young man that is having serious issues and problems in his life? 15 minutes every 2 weeks. When I know other people that live in a middle class community that have excellent insurance, they get 45 minutes. They see them twice a week, and just get better quality care.
Doc, you need to answer that because obviously, as the president of the Houston Black Psychological Association, and of course the fact that I read something several years ago say they would never have enough therapists, social workers, or professional providers, particularly from our community. Where is that going?
It's a great challenge, and you mentioned earlier before we even started talking, when the show started taping, that there are so few black professionals, mental health professionals out there. And the Association of Black Psychologists, we are really geared towards trying to ring in that next generation of black psychologists, doctors, and so forth, because there is a great need.
Absolutely.
I'm just a firm believer that we need to be the ones to provide the services to our people for them to create this understanding of health. You talked about recognizing abnormality versus normality and defining well-being. What is well-being for us? Right. But as you talk about resources, and I think we all deal with it from our various sectors in life and in terms of what we have been challenged or charged to do.
Right.
I'm at a HBCU. Trust me, there's a lot of challenges of well-being at a HBCU because students come from the very communities from which you guys operate in. Sure. And now they come to me. We're talking about having an open door policy. You start recognizing in terms of all they want. 15 minutes is not a lot of time.
Right.
15 minutes is only enough time for somebody just to sit in your office just to get comfortable and adjust to the temperature in the room.
Right.
But that's not enough time for them to begin to express and share some of their intimate thoughts, intimate feelings, and how they see the world. Most importantly, we have to recognize, how do these young people see the world? Right. And then we are there to shape and guide them, to help them understand. I have a model of mental health. I talk about positive mental health for African Americans is based on 3 C's. Connectedness, we talked about, addressed that a little bit, competency and consciousness. So we have to have them become aware of their surroundings, their environments, and to identify appropriate resources.
Right.
The young man I was just telling you about, of course, he first came to me. When he mentioned that, I pulled him aside. We had a conversation, and first thing he says, I don't want to go see a therapist because they were white, and all they try to do is just put me on medication. And that becomes a challenge.
But again, let's get real. In 2011, NAD judge Texas as being, how many states in the United States? 50 states. We 50 on the list dealing with mental illness.
Yes.
You talking about in the total delivery of services.
In the total delivery.
Funding, I think he's talking about the funding of services,
I
supporting
don't think it was
services.
funded this session.
So
as well.
again, so we're sitting at the bottom of the 50th states in the United States.
Plus, there's a question mark about health care.
Yes.
Period. It's currently on the agenda.
So if the state is sitting at 50, we in the black community are sitting at 55.
Right.
So we back behind
upside
Illinois
down,
State. So
Well, are you in agreement, though, based upon the fact that there's no professional link, like Sincere brought it up? Now, what resources are programs like yours needing to be expanded to help? Or programs like what he has in his particular community, or what Matthews has, to be expanded? Because at some point, you've got to say only the crisis cases
Can be
make
seen.
it to.
Well, like OG said, but I mean, the problem is getting worse because managed care, the way managed care is being structured now, you have less visits to the doctor.
Okay, so we got to take that off the table. Let's take that off the table. This is a roundtable discussion. So I want to take the fact that the populations we're talking about will not be insured.
Correct.
Right? They will not go and try to access any services traditionally.
Right.
Right.
Where's the church? Where's the community? How do they respond other than locking the doors and saying Ray, Jose can't get in? I mean, I want to find out from Matthew, from the church perspective, then you, OJ, from the community side on down the line.
Well, you know, that's a very good question. That's one I've been challenged with for over the years in sharing with the faith community that we can do more than have Bible study, although that's great, choir rehearsal, that's great, and prayer meetings, and that's great.
Right.
But after we get through doing that, then we have to be about our Father's business. I mean, that's just a vernacular that we use. We got to put faith to work.
Well, specifically. Explain that specifically.
And so to me, how I internalize that means the faith-based community must understand that it's okay to have relationships with the medical institution and providers who provide services and care. You can set up a benefit bank that draws people to you, that give people access to services. You can have a safe place for those returning citizens who've been incarcerated, who are faced with the dilemma of not being put back into the workforce, who have problems with transportation. And last but not least, we certainly need to understand that it's okay for the faith community to be about development. I think Kirby John has done a very good job in doing that. Joe Ratliff has done a very good job in doing that. Rudy Rasmus has done a very good job in doing that. I think we need to do more of that. And I think when we can take 50 churches in 2 blocks and pool our resources together economically and start talking about development of housing, and then invite those providers to come in and provide services to those parishioners in our churches and our community in our church, I think then we can see the impact in our community.
And I hear you very well. And that's my work in the community man, on the streets, boots on the ground, dealing with these brothers, that returning group of population that's coming out these institutions. And when we bring the issue about the effects that incarceration have on the minds of our young brothers coming out of prison, that's a post-traumatic stress that they deal with. We're dealing with depression.
Yes.
And then we're dealing with, even with the juvenile justice system that I'm talking about, when we know that 70% of the children that's diagnosed before they go in the juvenile justice system is diagnosed. Some of them may be overly diagnosed or underly diagnosed, and some of them may be just throwing a number on there to get some money, more money on them. But they said that 70% of our children that go into juvenile justice system have either a small form or a large form of mental illness, that they have no cure on knowing how to deal with our juveniles. 70%, that's 7 out of 10. So the question is, what happens to that population once they come back to our community? And who do we had Riverside Hospital, that was a great connection to our community that I had some sort of connections to, but Riverside Hospital is closed down. Right. Some of the young men that I deal with, when they come to me, because we got to recognize that suicide in the black community is on the rise.
Yes. Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And this internet, social media have drove our children to be they're cowards behind the media, that they can put pressure on each other, that suicide, that our young people are looking for people to reach out to, but they just don't know who to reach out to. Some of them come to me and I have to drop them off at the door and tell them to walk in Ben Taub Hospital and claim that they're thinking about killing somebody or either killing themselves. So we have really strong issues when it comes to dealing with our population, because I can't find too many doors open, and I wish I'm definitely gonna be looking for some open door churches that's willing to deal with that population of young people.
You know, I had a wise man tell me that you have about 114 churches in Third Ward, right? But there's only 14,000 people. So if you can capitalize on the assets that you have, the churches that you have, and train the laity, you know, to help out, and also know when to properly refer to a psychologist, a professional, then that would go a long way. But we don't use the assets that we have. True. You know, and also, I'm a strong believer that we need to get outside of the walls of the church and let the people know that we care about them. Right. You know, I pastor as associate pastor, and you know, I've been encouraging my pastor, you know, let's get out, because there's a lot of people out here that are suffering. There's a lot of people out here that they need to know that somebody cares about them, like you articulated, and they also need to be properly trained when we're talking about mental illness, to know the difference between, oh, she's just crazy, or we need to try to help bring her along where that individual can get some help.
Yeah.
Can I take a little pressure off the church? Because the majority of the time in the school years, the school have our children. You know what I'm saying? And if we don't come to grips in our community to take back over our schools, we can't have more police officers in our schools than counselors.
Yeah, that's true.
We're prepping our children towards what we call trauma, and trauma causes what? Depression and mental illness. Yeah. So therefore, we have to really relook, even with the churches could be a part, but our schools, and train some of the more counselors to be in there than to deal with more safety and law enforcement.
It says in this national plan, by the year 2030, depression will be the leading cause of disease burden globally. 900,000 persons commit suicide each year. This is globally, of course. Each year, suicide is the second most common cause of death among young people. I think they got a TV program out right now.
Yeah, yes.
That's
Netflix.
Yes, that's
13.
Tremendous amount of
That's
pressure on teenagers about 13 causes. Of suicide for a teenager. Well, Doc, I mean, come on. They showing teenagers how to commit suicide.
And in the end, one of them do commit suicide.
Yeah, and that just tells you again about this climate that we live in. You know, this sensationalism, this climate of ratings, and this climate of really not caring for how people may respond to the messages and images that they receive. We need to understand that when you begin to start displaying certain images constantly over and over and over again, you begin to make the abnormal normal.
That's right.
I talked about that earlier. We need to recognize that the more we keep making abnormal normal, then we begin to see that we have a challenge just within this culture, and I'm going to say what it is. The European culture from which we operate is antithetical to our best interests and is antithetical to the essence of what we represent. Right. And so now we are engaged in a lot of practices that says all this sensationalism, this immediate gratification, and all these things, that's all about what? The wow factor. Let's observe people in a most severe state of suffering just to identify ratings, not for assistance and not for help. So to talk, I haven't seen this show that you were speaking of, but to talk about, to understand that you're giving reasons as to why you're engaging or thinking about suicide ideation, depression, all that so forth. To me, that's disturbing. That's very disturbing.
So do you believe that, and I had a flashback about New Jack City that we came out against this. Years ago, I was almost castigated in Houston, Texas, but we trying to warn people that the behavior that was being demonstrated was going to be emulated, and it was. And now we're reaping. I think I mentioned that, so I'm coming clean tonight. I'm saying that we said then that the producers and the actors were leaving us, OG, with the vacuum cleaner to clean up their mess. In many cases. And I see it today, Doctor, with the idea of Real Housewives of Atlanta,
Yes.
the basketball wife. When my wife watches that show, and they start fighting halfway through the show, and the kind of language and the kind of abnormal behavior, Mr. Sincere, I don't think those of us in the church community or the normal community even want to believe that that's being viewed as normal life.
Well, I think the challenge is a lot of times people really believe the power is within themselves to make certain decisions, right? But again, my second component to the mental health model is competency. Not everybody is competent. And everybody can view things from a perspective in which they understand what could be reality and what's on the verge of being at least a fiction, or part of reality. But see, we start talking about this stuff about Housewives of Atlanta, these reality shows.
Right.
Inside it says reality. So now we begin to make the reality the absurd.
Yes.
And once we make the absurd the reality, it becomes a spectrum in which how we all are viewed, not for which we view things, but how which everyone is being viewed now by this so-called perspective. I want to kind of touch upon the church and the school bit, because you said it best in terms of we have to generate and bring all these different resources together to let people recognize there's another reality. What other reality do we want to demonstrate or propel? And that becomes very important because we're talking about recognizing children are in the schools for the most part of the day. And they're dealing with a challenge of, is there enough teachers who care for their well-being?
Competent teachers.
Competent teachers at that. With the church environment, is there enough pooling of resources?
Yes, absolutely.
Because the pooling of resources has to do with what each individual member of that congregation brings to the church. It's not just the church providing it, but is the church is made up of its congregation. And those people come with resources. And how do we figure out, we got to figure out those ways in which we can challenge that.
And being willing. You know, I've shot over 100 hours of video and done interviews in Third Ward alone. One of the things that I noticed is that you have a government project, the CUNY home, right next to an HBCU university, and for the most part, there is no connection.
There's no, oh, wow.
Right across the street, okay? And so when we start talking about using the resources that we have, you know, that's a tremendous educational institution that could walk across the street with the students and volunteers and et cetera to make an impact on people's lives that have been socially, economically impacted and probably experiencing, many of them, some type of continuous stress syndrome from living in that environment.
And that's the learning bed. See, that's the part in which we take our education and we make it practical, right? We apply what we're learning in real time. So that in and of itself, and it discourages me, or at least it behooves me to understand that how is it that you have a resource of young, talented students right across the street from a place that is need of their talents, their skills, to a system, and you make no connection. Now you begin to understand some challenges.
But let's get to the white elephant in the room.
The white elephant in the white elephant.
Can we really as black men walk around in America and not deal with the basic problems of what causes our mental illness? White supremacy sits at the root of our problem. It causes us not to be men that we need to be.
How far back are you going?
How far back do we?
How far back?
I'm putting this on the dock. I'm throwing this at the dock. How can we be men sitting up under our basics, sitting at white supremacy? I
told my son, I said, son, respect the police. Do what they say do. But when they shot the brother who was reaching for his wallet, I said, I don't know what to tell y'all. Just pray to stay alive. I mean, we got to laugh about it because it's so bad.
I totally agree. I think the root of all our challenges in America, particularly as black people, and I would include Hispanic people too, but the root of all our challenges in America has to do with white supremacy.
Thank you.
So I agree with the statement, And I'm glad we went there with the statement, because we also need to recognize that they do not have our best interests at heart.
Right.
Let's be real about it. And therefore, it is incumbent upon ourselves as men, to really demonstrate a way of being that says we will raise the next generation of young men first. We got to deal with our young men.
Exactly.
We got to give them the understanding, if not the image, of what they are to become.
Right.
And we also have to put on the table and at least have these conversations that we got to talk about. The first thing I tell my students, if you don't understand white supremacy, all that you think you know will only confuse you.
Right.
Francis Cresswell.
Let's be clear about that.
Yes.
And so, therefore, when you begin to think about what you're going to do for yourself, you want to create a media production for yourself in the future. You know, what type of image do you want to portray? And who is this image for, right? And so it becomes a challenge.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, OG, that you all raised that issue, because, you know, part of that segue into the incarceration aspect, on the post-incarceration and the aftermath. You understand? Going into legal issues, not getting adequate representation, not getting equity action in the courtroom. Then going through the institution of criminal justice, coming out, can't get a job, can't get housing. All that leads to those type of inequities and discrimination and racism factors. And so I just want to make an appeal to every brother, any brother and or sister who was a returning citizen from incarceration to call me at 281-410-8690. 281-410-8690. I want to know who they are, who are faced with these type of challenges and dilemmas. Now, if you want to see recidivism decrease, then you have to allow persons to have access to the economic system.
That's right.
I think that the system perpetuates the burden to the economy system. If you keep me out, you prevent me from paying property taxes, paying taxes, purchasing power, consumerism, the whole 9 yards. So I think that, you know, they are perpetuating the problem and not solving the problem. I also want to go back to the point of we talked about resources, for an example, Texas Southern and the community home. One of the things that I find in my work is that we are not resource poor in Harris County.
Yes.
Being the 27th largest, you know, larger than 27 states. We're not resource poor, but we work in our silos. And it amazed me how governmental state agencies work under one roof, 3 doors down from each other, and nobody knows what anybody's doing.
Right.
The other thing, I don't like the way how systems try to prostitute the faith-based community.
Yes.
They want us to do their work while they submit these RFPs to get grant funding, then come to the faith community and say, it's your spiritual fiduciary responsibility to just do God's will, and you use these numbers to meet compliances to get another $20 million.
Right,
And you
somewhere
never,
else. Right.
you know, look, ministry is expensive.
Right.
If you're going to really impact the community, you got to have resources to do that. The lack of funding, even if we bring them in and we identify, we've talked about the issue that there's a lack of representation from the African-American professional realm. And I agree with you. I think, you know, when there's cultural incompetence, then it's going to be difficult to relate to someone like me. Just dealing with chronic illnesses, right? If someone have a strong language and there's a language barrier, we're not going to communicate very well. And I'm not going to understand their behavior patterns either, because some people, culture is very dominant, very aggressive, and you know, just like if we raise our voice, sometimes they think we're mad when we just kind of being a little vocal, right?
Right.
And so we need to access, and I think systems need to really, if they really want to transform a better society, you have to come together and be liberal in sharing with the faith community. And I don't want to just put all that burden on the schools, the faith community, the preachers, and so forth.
Right.
We cannot negate parents' responsibility.
Absolutely.
Parents must take responsibility to become educated themselves and become more responsible as a parent, in spite of the stresses and anxieties that they deal with. I'm a man with children. I face those same kind of challenges. But listen, you know, I also have to keep some leverage to engage in my son and my daughter. And by the way, my son attempted to commit suicide 10 times. And it provoked me to engage him once that surfaced to me and brought to my attention that I had to reach out I had to acquire information, educate myself, and then engage him and reaffirm him that he have support.
I want to talk about momentarily the idea of what you're saying, that telephone number you gave out
Yes.
was for who again was it?
For those who are re-entering citizens from
So you-
being incarcerated.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can call that number.
Okay.
On that issue there, I'm gonna go back to the doc again because you brought up a subject that your wife is kind of worried about where you had at certain points
Right,
of night,
right.
and just like he brought, is it really healthy up under the environment you say that we are up under now, living up on anxiety constantly, which is a chemical flow in our body of survival? Do it keeps us focused, keeps us chemically unbalanced to walk, live, to prepare ourselves in an environment like this here on a constant basis? Can we really perform to our highest duties up under this kind of anxiety?
That's an excellent question because we need to understand from a holistic perspective.
Right.
Right. Our environment impacts our biological nature in terms of how we function. So you're talking about how the neurotransmitters in the brain
Right.
are either they firing or they're not firing. We're talking about the epigenome studies now coming out. You know, we are triggering
Right.
some genetic off switches or on switches based on the environment, from the environment that's out there, things we put in our bodies. So we're talking about holistic. There's a holistic approach to understanding health, mental health, physical health, spiritual health, emotional health.
Right.
So all these things are centered on the understanding that research has already been done. Research has been captured that when you continue to expose somebody to continual stress,
Yes.
they always are building up this cortisol levels. Well, we understand that the cortisol levels also impacts other, say, chemical structures or chemicals, neurotransmitters are in the brain.
Right.
And that can impact what? Our way of thinking.
Right.
Depression. Let's understand how depression has been diagnosed and how been treated. It's treated what from the medical field, medical side, right? Where you're giving people medication to treat depression. And most people may think depression is just a form of sadness. No, it's a chemical change now in the brain.
Wow.
And so that begins to affect the whole understanding of how we need to look at mental health, but more importantly, how we need to try to prevent. Because that's what you're asking about.
Right, exactly.
How can we prevent the progression of some of these mental health challenges that we have in our communities? So it's very important that we understand that and take it in perspective. So it requires us to understand nutrition, how nutrition plays a role. It requires us to understand how in relationships, how we relate to each other, and we just come together and just be comrades, right? With camaraderie. Sometimes we feel good just being in the space of with others. But that's a chemical component of feeling good. That's that oxytocin within your blood, right?
Right.
They talk about oxytocin, it's very important. And so all these things become major factors, if not determinants, of identifying somebody on a trajectory towards a mental health imbalance. I'm just talking about the beginning of it. Of mental health. Too much stressors in our lives, within our communities. People are avoiding us, feeling like we're isolated, we're alone, nobody listening to us. And I'm talking about how the young people feel. Nobody's listening to us. And where do I go for resources and help?
That's right.
So what I hear you articulating, Doc, is that every day when I wake up and I have to go face a big world out there as an African American, and I'm being reminded that I'm black on a regular basis and have different challenges, I'm perceived differently, have different standards, et cetera and whatnot. Those things within life itself cause stressors, stress in my life that have a chemical reaction that impacts me. It impacts my health. It impacts my heart. It impacts different organs in my body, research that I've read concerning that. And so it's very disturbing to me that we live in a society where just because of the skin of my color, my lifespan may be shorter. My question is this. My question is, what can we do as African Americans to start to change that trend?
Well, part of it has to do with the fact, just like we're having these discussions here right now. And I say this to my students all day, it starts with us having conversation and then recognizing within those conversations, what's the commonalities between us and even the things that we diverge on in terms of our thinking. But we got to respect each other. More importantly, how do we begin to conduct ourselves? So it's a daily practice. right? We have to do things on a daily basis. It's like you have to get up and go to work on a daily basis. You got to take care of your body, your vehicle, this machine. You got to take care of it on a daily basis. So you got to make good decisions. Once you make good decisions and the right choices, guess who feels good first? You do.
Right.
You see, so those are strategies I try to give off when I'm dealing with people and talking to them. You make decisions, and when you make the certain decisions, making healthy decisions at that, you begin to feel good about yourself. And guess what you do? When you feel good about yourself, what do? You share that with other people.
Right.
You know, and that's just the way we function as human beings. You're talking about Ubuntu. Ubuntu is this, my humanity is based on your humanity, right? The art of recognizing another person's existence also helps me recognize my own existence.
Right.
And so when I begin to function on a day-to-day basis, offering advice, assistance wherever I can, just reaching out when I can, having an open door policy, allowing people to come and express things to me just to get it off their chest, we realize that we're actually doing something for somebody. But then it goes beyond that. And then you begin to talk about, again, well, what are you doing to maintain health? Right? We can think we are mentally healthy, but your actions, your behaviors indicates that you are mentally healthy. You know, are you capable of, you know, putting the right nourishments in your body, nutrition?
Right.
That's important. Are you exercising like you should? For whatever the case may be. A lot of folks probably doing a lot of walking down on the street. Walking on the streets, just doing and helping, you know, helping those who need the help. Guess what? That's a form of exercise. We have to recognize the things that we're doing for ourselves that denotes or at least indicates that I am a healthy living vessel, and then we share those things. We share those tactics, we share those approaches, we share those practices with other people. And you got to galvanize folks. You got to encourage folks. Like, hey, we all can do this.
Right.
You know, we all, just like someone did it for you, you can do it for somebody else. Do you get that train reaction, that you begin to, you know, like that train reaction of passing things down, you know, passing it forward and all that good stuff.
But it goes back to what Dr. Matthew was saying, and I'm asking Dr. again, you're saying one of our biggest issues is that we suffer from a lack of self-esteem.
Yes.
And that what you talk about, we have to have self-esteem, self-love to even want to go to that level to look for a healthier eating. And in the community that I deal with, the urban area that I deal with, most of the mothers that's raising 70% of the young boys that I deal with, they have no energy or self-esteem to take it to that level. A lot of my people are looking for the level of how do I die quicker because I'm tired of living on the level that I'm at. So how do we take back our community, take back our schools, put more men in the house to help our women raise our boys, because we're dealing with a population now of the 80s babies.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your question. I love your question. And you bringing it here, OG. You bringing it down to us.
Round table discussion.
Exactly. That's what makes it round here. And I love it. So it gets to my third part of our mental health component. We have to be conscious.
Yes.
It's all about being conscious. Consciousness is an understanding of our race as a people from which we come, to the trials and tribulations in which we travel through already, traversed past already, to the point of how we are continuing to exist today. If we begin to take that into consideration of recognizing who are we and what we're about, we begin to see the vestiges of what? The resiliency factors, the positive factors, the parts of culture that talks about what makes us us, that allows us to continue to survive. Who else could have survived the Ma'afa experience, the experience of torturing and tormenting black people for 400 years? Who else could have done that? Only we could have, and we have done it. So there are vestiges within that parameter, that framework of how we function and operate that continues to allows us to exist. Well, we have to capture the positive aspects of those things. You know, what is the makeup of the family? I'm not going to sit there and talk to those mothers and make them feel bad as a parent because of the challenge that they're dealing with, but I am going to try to get them to recognize that there are ways in which you operate that continues to make the black family a viable function within our communities. We still believe in communal ways of relating to each other. We still believe in sharing our experiences. We are very emotional people, and we share our emotions. And so we believe in that. Now, what's challenging is, as you talk about the young men, they want to be tough. You can't express, you know, sincerity, or you can't express a sign of weakness, right? But still, they're definitely expressing their emotions to us. When you call it aggressiveness or anger, that's emotion to me. And I try to get young people to recognize, let's talk about this aggression. You know, why do you feel this way? You know, and the more we make connections with that from a conscious understanding of who we are as a people, then we begin to make changes. And I see it constantly. I keep telling you, I see it every day. A student just came to me today because we talked about resources in the community and so forth. They just happened to take a trip down to, they said, I went to the community center. I said, where'd you go? She said, somewhere on the south side. First thing out of my head was, you must have been to the Shape Center.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's what they called it. I just happen to have a picture when we did the town hall meeting at the Shape Center. I didn't know I was going to be in this particular picture. I said, oh, I was there. Look at that picture. That's the room I was in. Now, she became aware, like, whoa, you was at the Shape, I was at Shape. They had all this stuff on African, they had all this stuff on black people. And I didn't know what I kept feeling like, where'd I get this from? Somehow I sensed this somewhere before. Well, there's a spirit that resonates within all of us. And we have to appreciate that the spiritual aspect of what makes us us is a viable, resilient factor that can help maintain our health. But we have to tap into that understanding of spirit.
But isn't, Doc, didn't the church used to have that, didn't the church used to play that part and role at a period of time in our community?
The church played a significant role in terms of making sure that the family was together, making sure the community was together, making sure that when we did have to, say, help Sister Mary down the block because she's having some challenges and troubles, everybody came through and they supported it. So the church definitely has a role. The church continues to have a role. But we are now so dispersed now. So now you got some churches who probably don't have, we may have enough people power. But again, we're talking about what's that real resource. There's some economic resources that has to be part of that people power too at the same time.
And one of the things that I recognize, Gilmore, for you make that point, one of the things that I share with the faith leaders is, you brought that point up several times tonight, and that is, we don't do an assessment of our human capital that's in our congregations. And when we can do that, because you never know what a person have, who a person knows, what a person can do. And we need to tap into that. And I dare not let us move forward without you ask the question about what can we do. And you know, the Bible says that we should pray without ceasing. I think Christ understood that there was going to be some infractions and inequities and abuses imputed upon humanity. And so for me, prayer has been a thing to help me not lose my mind completely. And one of the things that I use for monitoring myself is what doctors also talked about, is analyzing and knowing my behavior patterns. When my behavior becomes abnormal, I know that I've drifted into another sphere of functioning that's not healthy for me. You know, and so prayer, health, meditation, exercising, those are the things that I use to keep me balanced.
And I would also, you know, recommend for you that are out there that if you have a young man over 18 years old, give me a call at 832-775-2750. The access, the organization that I work for professionally, we house over 300 men. For me, it's just a phone call to be able to say, can we get this man off the streets, right? Also, the same thing for families. It's just a phone call for me to call that director and say, can we get this young lady off the streets? You also talk about rapid rehousing. You know, once you get them into the shelter, you want to try to get them the services that they need so they can get into their own place, right? And then permanent type housing. You know, and also one of the things that I've seen out there that lacks the most is aftercare. Okay, and so aftercare is essential. Once they go to a program, they go to a shelter, having the support around them long term to try to help them build that social stratification, build a community around them that will continue to help them and be that example is extremely important. So pastors that are out there, I talk to pastors all the time, and I tell them, I say, well, look, you got this young man that's in your church. You know he's on drugs. Give me a call, and I can help, and I don't get calls.
Right.
And you know, I'm definitely, that's a great point there, because me, after being in prison 20 years and being out 20 years, one of my greatest things that I had to get a life coach. Even though I am a life coach, I have a life coach.
Right.
Yes.
I have to have somebody I can easily pick up the phone at any time of the night when I'm going through my mental stresses,
Right.
to talk to let it out, because in some of the old tribal days in Indian
Yes.
tribes, therapeutic ways of letting it out and talking to somebody is a great way of healing yourself. So we have to teach brothers how to have somebody in their corner that they can call 24 hours a day. Have a coach, have a coach.
And I want to say this too, and I think this is extremely important. Men, it's okay to admit that you're hurting.
Right. Definitely.
That's good.
Definitely.
It's okay to admit that I'm not feeling well today, and I don't feel like I have it all together, and I need to go talk to somebody. It does not mean that you are not a man because you're hurting. It's okay to cry. It's okay to hurt, but we need to be able to go to someone to get some help and talk to somebody about it.
I want to.
We want to wrap it up. And
Yeah.
Doc, why don't you start off with the wrap up, but tell us about the upcoming events as you make those final points.
We was talking about being creative in terms of establishing resources, and I got to give this young lady a lot of respect in terms of, she called the Association of Black Psychologists, saying, when we talking about providing assistance and services for people, she had an idea, and her idea was that she likes to throw a birthday party bash for herself, but she realized that it's probably more important that when she does throw this birthday bash, can she raise funding or assistance to assist the very people who need therapy, who needs help, but can't afford it.
Right.
So now we are teaming up together. The Association of Black Psychologists, this young sister, I Am Mallory production organization, to where she's gonna throw these events, and the events is to raise money to what? To provide funds for services out there. I thought that was very creative. Well, we got to be, that's the rent parties, right? See, that's like throwing rent parties. So we got to be very creative when it comes to that. And with that, we also talk about the understanding that, you know, when we start talking about, you know, Black Lives Matter, we start talking about the mental health of black people, we have to recognize that there's going to be a major national convention coming to Houston. Wow. And I invite all of you to be there. And it's going to be July 19th through the July 23rd in Houston. And it's going to be at the Royal Sonesta Hotel. And so we're going to have over, in talking behind the scenes to the convention coordinator so far, we have over 330 people who's already registered for this convention that's coming to Houston. We definitely plan on having more. But we have a couple of events. We have a pre-conference event that's going to take place. That's going to be, it's a coalition for the preservation of black families that's going to take place on July 18th. That's a pre-convention event. That's going to consist of the black social workers, hopefully a black psychiatrist will be on there, lawyers will be a part of this particular event, and also individuals from the Association of Black Psychologists. Psychologists will be on this particular panel as well to talk about real, distinct strategies of how to preserve the black families and what we can do with that. And we're going to deal with it from multiple levels, and from the legal system we talked about, again, from the social system, social service system that we talked about, and providing mental health care. We're also going to have another presentation for the pre-convention that's going to be done by Sheila Savannah and Zina Bell on community trauma and community therapy. And so that's a very exciting, interesting presentation. We need to get this out to people. But the Association of Black Psychologists is here to what? To elevate the positive mindset of black mental health. That's what we're here for. So we need to come out and support these type of events. And so again, July 19th to the July 23rd, we're going to have these this convention, national convention. You're going to have people coming in from London, England, black psychologists. Black psychologists coming from some of the Caribbean islands coming into this conference. And so I really hope that all of Houston, all of black Houston, make it to this convention, this conference, because there'll be some dynamic speakers. There's going to be some people with some very good insight to answer the questions that we have been talking about.
Great.
I'm just a representation of that particular group, right?
Great.
So I can't provide all of it.
But if you come to the event, you'll get a lot of it. OG, you got a big event coming up?
Yeah, every year. This is the 5th year we've been doing it. It's called Snuffing Out the Smell of Death. You know, a lot of times we see death before it comes, but we still tipped it. So every year at the funeral home, I've been bringing like 300 young people in the funeral home, and I bring mothers that been victimized, lost children to violent crime. And I let these mothers get up before these gang members and all these at a funeral home, and we do a tour around the funeral home. We got a casket in there. We give them information on what a funeral costs, because a lot of young people don't know funerals are high.
Yeah.
So we take them in the room and let the funeral director show, it may be a body on the table, show that what he have to do and the needles that he have to stick in the body. So this kind of thing for the last 5 years have been powerful, it's been effective, and mothers have actually asked for me to bring it back every year because it have a powerful impact on the young people. The date is July the 29th from 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock at 2517 Wheeler at the Rodney Byrd Funeral Home. Be there at 10 o'clock. Bring your young person and bring your daughters, because we're in a time to where our kids have been desensitized due to the video game and due to the violence. We have to get our kids back connected that life is real. Once it's over, it's over.
I've been there. It's packed house. Better
Packed
get there
house.
early. Anything happening since here? 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that, you know, give me a call,
832.
832-775-2750. If you want your story out there, Sincere Media will put it out there. We need to
David
tell our own
Sincere,
story.
right? Ask for
David-
you.
That's right.
Matthews.
Just want to make an appeal to the pastors. If you're interested in having a faith-based mental health ministry at your church, feel free to contact me at 281-410-8690. I'd be glad to consult with you and help you implement a faith-based health ministry at your church to serve your community.
I want to thank all my guests tonight. This has been a tremendous discussion, roundtable discussion. There was a lot more to put on the table. We certainly going to have to come back again. I wanted to make a closing point. The Hope and Healing Center and Institute was at the Greater Zion Baptist Church. Excellent presentation. They made themselves available to communities. You can call that number 713-871-1004. Regardless, ladies and gentlemen, you need help, get help. There's help available. Church, community organizations, professionals, listen, don't sit back, act like you're not a part of this issue. It affects all of us. Whether we're looking at the news, we see a person, we know someone, family members, all of us can do more, all of us can do better, and don't take it for granted that somebody else is doing something or somebody else knows who to reach out to. It's because of programs like this, in fact, where we can get the message out, share, you can hear from distinguished guests, people who have been in the trenches currently every day. This has been Public Affairs, Public Access here at the Houston Media Source, a tremendous place to support and make sure we can keep these kind of programs on the air. Because if we don't have a voice, you won't hear it, you won't see it, you won't have this kind of insight. And I know that over time, you'll be able to reach out and find somebody or some organization that can help you with your particular need. That's it, ladies and gentlemen, we've enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this program. Stay tuned. There's more information. You'll see it again. I've been your host, Dr. Robert McKinley Gilmore Sr. It's always a blessing just to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.